All right, so before we get started, I'd like everyone except for myself, as well as Carmen and Taran, to turn off their microphones and their cameras. That way, that's the only ones that are showing up on the screen. My name is Brandon Schmidt. I am an instructor at BCTC. This is actually my first semester. I go by he, him, his, and I am a queer man or a gay man. I identify as either. So let me go ahead and introduce our two wonderful people for being here. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So first off, we have Carmen Wampler-Collins. Carmen is the first ever executive director of the Pride Community Services Organization, and her role as executive director is to develop the physical, fiscal, and structural supports needed to take the Pride Community Services Organization into the next 40 years and beyond. And with the support of the PCSO Board of Directors, Carmen is working specifically with developing new opportunities for stakeholders to join the PCSO to be able to support LGBTQ plus people in the region. And then Taran McZee, he powerfully embraces his calling as a scholar and educator. His work covers topics such as student success, male leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mr. McZee has presented and lectured at several different conferences, as well as universities throughout the US, and he has several years of experience in higher education leadership and has served as the BCTC Associate Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He is currently serving as Chief Diversity Officer for Holland Public School District in Holland, Michigan. So now I will allow Carmen to go ahead and introduce herself and tell us a little bit more before we get started with the panel.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all for hosting this. I'm excited to be a part of it. I work at the PCSO. I am, as you said, the first executive director, but I started here just working as the office manager. I'm a lesbian and have been out, since the early 90s. I live with my wife and we have 2 boys. And sort of how I got involved in doing this work was we've sort of been activists for a long time, but we were I'm from Moorhead, Kentucky, home of Kim Davis. And when she refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses, we got involved in that movement. Some of the people I'd known all of my life, I was surprised to see, standing up with us. So that was a really important thing to me. And we ended up becoming the first couple that received their marriage license. And sort of in that process and through helping to start a nonprofit in Moorhead, I decided I really wanted to look into doing this more for a career. I had previously done work with affordable housing and was a consultant as a development and fundraiser, and started here just to supplement that income. And it kind of took over my life. I love the work and really love being able to maintain the safe space of the Pride Center and being able to create and run programs that support LGBTQ people. And basically, our goal is really to make sure all LGBTQ plus Kentuckians feel celebrated and have spaces where they're welcomed and supported.
Great, thank you. All right, Taran, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's going to be a tough act to follow, but my name is Taran McZee. My gender pronouns is he, him, his. I am a heterosexual / cisgender male. I've been in diversity, equity, and inclusion work for about 16, 17 years now. And my rationale behind why this work is so important to me, especially being an ally, for the LGBTQ community. Mine is very, very personal. My son is actually a part of the LGBTQA community. No, I did not just out him. I've been given permission to use him when I'm having conversations, when I'm talking, when I'm on panelists, when I'm talking about equity and equality for the LGBTQA community. So he's given me permission to tell his story. But my son, I never forget this. I was at Northern Arizona University at the time. I had just finished the completion of the new LGBTQ lounge, resource and services department lounge, all the above. So they had never had a program or office or anything, but I had just completed it there. And I was getting ready that evening for our huge LGBTQA coming out monologues that they do every year. And it was my first year at the second year at the institution. And so my son came to be a freshman at Northern Arizona University. And 5 minutes before he went on, he came and told me that he was bisexual. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it was a lot, because it was like he hit me all at one time, and then he was going on stage. And so I sat there, I listened to his story, one of the most beautiful stories that I think I've almost ever heard in my life, as well as I'm sitting there trying to understand and trying to process it at the same time. And so he conducted his coming out story, came and hugged me afterwards. And so on the ride home, I just kind of asked him, like, son, why'd you wait this long? And to be honest with you, as a parent, I already knew. I had just been waiting on him to actually tell me. I don't think it would have been my right to even ask the question. But I did ask him, like, what took you so long to tell me this? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, son, I've known for years. He said, and I told him, I've just been waiting for you to tell me. And he had said he was always scared to tell me because he said, Dad, you raised me as a man. I said, I raised you as a man, but I also raised you as a person, So I have been a catalyst since he's told me this. I have continued my LGBTQA allyship journey. I'm still learning as we speak. I am a doctoral student at the University of Kentucky, and my professor, Dr. Johnson, in my diversity and inclusion class, challenged me to do something or to create or speak on something that I'm not as comfortable or well versed in. And so my whole class was about the LGBTQ perspective, my journey, my journey as well as the LGBTQ community, and my level of education on it. And I've learned so much since I've taken that class, and she has pushed me. I do 4 big projects for that class, and each one of them was a different aspect of the LGBTQA community. So, that's my intro.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to start off with a question, and once I ask this question, I'd like everyone else involved to think up questions that they might have for our 2 panelists, and I'll open it up if you just use the raise hand option to ask those. But the first question I'd like to ask is, why should straight folks or cisgender people be interested in issues that LGBT people face?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is really just to make a better world. Like, everybody should care about their neighbors, their friends, their family, whether or not, some folks may know LGBTQ plus folks, but whether or not you think you do, you probably do, or you will in the future. And I honestly believe that more freedom for anybody is better for everybody, right? So in places where I'm an ally to a community, I don't see that work as a favor, but it's actually improving the world for me and my family and my kids, even if it doesn't seem like those issues are directly related to you. They are. So.
Great. Taran?
Yeah, sure. To piggyback off what Carmen said, I think it's about to achieve equity. I think LGBTQA people need the help of allies. Honestly, I think when we all work together, I think we can affect great change if we all work together. I think we've heard all kind of like reasons about why people are allies, but also think people that are allies also need to understand what they're fighting for as well. I think some people, a lot of people have, friends and family members who want to make a change and make things better. I think others realize that discrimination against any group is wrong and needs to be stopped. But I always lean on the side of Dr. Martin Luther King's words in terms of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and I believe all voices should count. So those are my thoughts on it.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? All right, I will throw in another question. What do I do as a person if someone who is LGBTQ plus comes out to me? What should I do?
You want me to go first?
Sure, go ahead. You take this one.
I think most people who come out, I think they've put a lot of thought into telling someone. So I think it's important to take it seriously as an ally. I think it's important to let the person know that you still care about them, even if you don't understand at that point. I think we all need to remember that you have a relationship with this person, or they wouldn't be coming to you at all, right? So either due to common interest, or even if they're your relative, why should this change just because the gender that they are assigned to at birth is different than the gender that they are? I think it's okay to let the person know that it might take some time to understand. I'm really talking from from my own experience. Take some time to understand, and it might take some time to get used to. So like making sure you're using the right pronouns, using the right name for them, and let them know that you would do your best to just support them. That's what I think.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And to kind of add on to that, I mean, I would agree that if someone's coming out to you, I would see it as a real sign of trust. I mean, first of all, like, even if it makes you nervous or you don't know all the right things to do, the first thing you need to know is this person trusts you enough to share something about themselves that, depending on your relationship, might be difficult to share. So for one, just like, even if you have questions, and that is fine if you don't know, just listening, just listening and letting that person know that you still love them, you still care about them. Depending on what your own personal situation is, you can congratulate people. It's a big deal for people to make that step. And I'm not thinking just personally, but even here at the center, we often have people coming in to come out, and so generally the first thing I will say is congratulations, you're not alone. Know that other people have gone through this. It will be okay. And really just listen then and ask what they need from you. I would make sure, like, especially if it's someone who's trans coming out, what pronouns they want to be called by, what name they want to use, and honor that. Also, it's really important if someone is coming out to you to ask them if they're out anywhere else, because you don't want to inadvertently out someone. So it's really important to understand, just because someone has come out to you doesn't mean it's okay to share it with anybody else unless you have their permission. So yeah, and just be supportive in their journey. And it's usually not a one-time conversation, so as you continue your relationship with that person, you can ask questions, and don't let it just be a one-time thing or something you never talk about again.
Great, thank you. And I would like to piggyback off of Carmen there. If you do end up having someone that's trans that comes out to you, it is okay to try to be an ally. And if you mess up, that's okay. But take anything that they say to you with, honor that. If they say, hey, you messed up, these are my pronouns. This is my name. That was my or that's my dead name, or the name I used to go by. Take that as a learning time to be able to learn to be a better person and support trans folks.
Yeah, and I would also say, and I think this is very important, and depending on your exposure and your knowledge about the LGBTQ community, you may have your own emotions about that, and that is great. I would try to find a supportive person to discuss that with, rather than this person who's just coming out, and try to make their coming out to you about them and what you can do for them, acknowledging that your feelings are important. And there's lots of support for friends and family out there too.
Great. So we have a question in the chat by Vanessa. Vanessa asked, how can we as allies be more proactive instead of reactive in supporting the LGBTQ community?
I think, just as an ongoing part of life, for example, right now, the Equality Act is in the Senate of the US right now, and every person, we're hearing from our groups that folks on the other side who don't want that passed are bombarding their senators, and they're not hearing as much for people who support that. So staying aware of those topics, call your senators, speak up. It does matter. You don't have to be a part of the group. The more they hear from people, the more they know that it's important to the general population that we have LGBTQ equality. You can visibly wear ally pins so people know, give people a way to know that you're a safe person. Look at where you work. Are they LGBTQ affirming? How can you be more affirming in your workspaces? You can give money and time to LGBTQ organizations. There are a ton in Lexington who do this work on an ongoing basis. And just always being open and ready to support folks who do come out to you.
And man, I everything you just said, Carmen, is 1000%. Everything you just said, and I think also too, Vanessa, what you could do is, I think also it's just as important to learn and understand. What, again, I think I said it earlier, what are you fighting for? What's the historical content behind the LGBTQ community? What's some of the history of the LGBTQ community? And I think the more you understand, the more you learn, the easier it is for you to be proactive and supporting the LGBTQA community in your own ally journey. So I guess that would be my 2 cents to add to what Carmen had already said.
Yeah.
Already. So.
Great. So just a general question, how can we as people support LGBTQ people?
I think, some of the things we just said, another thing we didn't really touch on, but is when you do encounter transphobia, homophobia, biphobia, is speaking up when you can. And that's a process, you have to build your own comfort level and how to respond to things. But when you're in a group of cis straight folks and someone makes a joke or makes comments, learning to be able to counter that, and think of, all the places in your life where you can make a stand, and you may not think it matters because there's nobody there seeing you, but that's how things change. I really firmly believe that we really need allies. It's not just us out there saying that, but the other people who care, it makes a big impact.
I agree. I think Carmen said, be a listener. I think, be open-minded. I think be willing to talk as well. I think most importantly, being able to confront your own prejudice and biases, even if it is uncomfortable for you to do so. I think never, out anyone to anyone. I think, support you, make sure you're using the appropriate pronouns. I think being inclusive is very, very important. And at the end of the day, I think you need to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you can be more supportive towards the LGBTQA community.
Mm-hmm. And for folks personally, one-on-one in your life, you can ask what people need. You can ask what organizations need that support the LGBTQ community, rather than assuming, because it's different. It may be different for everybody, and what you think you want to offer may not be what the needs are. So just listening, and responding to that.
Agree.
And in the chat, Bruce here mentioned that he uses LGBTQ plus literature in his English course. Yeah. So that's another way that we as educators can be sure that we are supporting queer folk and making sure that, they are supported and they see it in a way that isn't just completely like, hey, I support you, but they see you actually supporting them.
Right.
And that's actually a non-verbal cue that Bruce has done in terms of incorporating LGBTQA into his, and I'm hoping I'm using the right pronouns for him, but into his curriculum. A lot of, and be very transparent, a lot of professors don't do that whatsoever. They don't diversify their curriculum at all, whether it's LGBTQA, whether it's African American, whether it's Hispanic, people of color, LGBTQA of color. So, Bruce, I tip my hat to you in terms of making sure that you are putting those type of opportunities into and diversifying your curriculum as well.
And one other thing, and people sometimes, like at meetings, I might have a lot of confusion about this, but sharing your pronouns, even if you are cisgendered, is really important. When you introduce yourself in a meeting or on your profiles and that kind of thing, because by doing that, we're normalizing the fact that people share pronouns and that there's not a standard and that you can't always tell by looking at someone what pronouns they use. And so you're not just forcing only non-binary or trans people to have to do that. So that's another really easy way you can support folks in the community.
Also, too, is something, Carmen, that you mentioned a little earlier in terms of like, having artifacts that exemplifies the LGBTQ community, so like stickers and all that stuff. So one thing I did at BCTC, my time there, is I had a rainbow shoestring hanging outside my doorknob.
Yeah.
Again, the small nonverbal thing helped a lot of students even come to my office, or made students more comfortable to come to my office and talk to me.
Yeah. For example, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I was recently looking for a physical therapist, and before I picked one, I went through all of their websites and everything. And when I saw somebody who had posts about Pride Month and Black Lives Matter, that's a trigger to that's somebody who shares value. So I'm always looking for that when I choose a new provider, to make sure I'm not going to pick someone who's homophobic or So those kind of things really do matter, and it kind of signaling. Yeah.
And another way, at least in my email signature, I use my pronouns. And beside that, I have in parentheses a "what's this?" and it's a link that goes to an article talking about pronouns. So I use that as a way to educate folks on, why it is that I have this in my email signature. All right, so another question. So we've talked about that, speak up if someone says something, and speak up for these groups if you are not a part of being LGBTQ. But how would you, or what kind of advice would you give to folks that are straight or are cisgender and they're uncomfortable in speaking up and they aren't sure quite what to say?
Well, I think the good thing is that it's a practice, and all of us can learn to do better at it. One of the tools I've found most helpful recently is and it's hard for me because I tend to get angry when I want to respond out of anger. But if I can take a beat and try to ask questions. So if someone makes a negative comment, a transphobic comment, instead of just responding to argue, ask about it. So say, why do you feel that way? Or, I don't get that. Can you explain to me a little more why you feel that way? Or just responding with curiosity in the hopes that you can then have a conversation, right? So if you're not doing, and it's not always possible, and especially if, depending on what the situation is and who it is, like if it's folks who, aren't going to have a conversation, it may not even be worth doing that. But that's trying to engage people so you can see more about where they're coming from and how to have a conversation that might make change is my best suggestion.
I would say that as a heterosexual cisgender man, I've had people question and or ask, Taran, why do you, in the slang terms of the students today, why do you go so hard for the LGBTQ community? And I have to speak from a position where I'm not outing my son at that point, but about why I feel strongly about it. And so, it's equality. I mean, it's even in the playing field. That's what it's about. And so when I talk with people, or people ask me about it, it's always interesting that they don't understand why a heterosexual male is so passionate about the LGBTQA community. And I said, well, it's really not none of your business. Why? First and foremost, I know a lot of heterosexuals get nervous and or scared that people will think that they are gay, especially if a person doesn't know them, they're a part of the LGBT community. And I don't have that fear at all. I know how to have a conversation and make it known that I am a heterosexual male. And I'm here to learn and understand and to grow in my journey. So I think, having the opportunity to have that unique outside voice, I think is powerful, and it carries credibility as well. But I also think it can help, draw attention to and raise awareness about the issues that our LGBTQA community, face on a daily basis. So that's what I think. Speaking up and acknowledging, I think that's important.
Yeah, and you don't have to do it perfectly. I mean, don't think, I think saying anything, just making a stand, like, don't feel like you have to there's some equation, but, even if you do it awkwardly, even if it's just important that you make your voice heard.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions? I will go ahead and ask another, but if you want to type in the chat, I'll bring that up next. So what should a person do if one of their straight friends or coworkers is feeling negatively or reacting poorly to someone that is LGBTQ+?
Well, I think that that person should be called to the table. But everybody doesn't have that in them either. Some people like to, stay away from negativity or stay away from conflict. And I'm a person that doesn't mind conflict whatsoever. So I'm only speaking to people that, is okay with, pulling somebody to the side and saying, hey, that's not cool. That how are you feeling, what you're thinking? I think that's not right. I think, me, if I were you, I would go and I would apologize. I would try to get understanding on why they feel that way as well, because they could be struggling with their own sexuality at that point in time. But I think that if we put a person or call a person to the table, I think they're more reluctant to do it again. Well, at least at work, or at least in the comfort of other people, I think they'd be more reluctant to do it again. But you can never tell what a person is doing behind closed doors. So I'm a big proponent of not necessarily calling that person out in front of everybody, but pulling that person to the side and, you know, and just talking to them and saying that's not cool whatsoever. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if you, I mean, it depends on your, you know, your workplace culture, but I've found the same, like just calling it out, like, you know, we don't do that here, and making it clear. You know, it's not okay with you personally. I mean, you can always say that. And then if you're not in a position, you know, to make that correction, like talking to a supervisor or talking to folks in your organization who maybe could take more action. Again, I think it's just important to address it and make sure people know, like, it's not okay with you. And there are different ways to handle it. There, you know, I have my sister-in-law who is from Eastern Kentucky, a really conservative family, but because she's known me and my wife, she's a very, she does come hard on LGBTQ issues. So, you know, she was ready to fight a couple of people at her work, you know, in this conservative little town grocery store. But it makes an impact on people to see people that they know in their communities who are like, no, I don't think that way. No, here's what you got to learn. So I think it's just important to say something. There are different approaches. You can approach it from curiosity, asking questions, trying to get to the bottom of it. But overall, I really, really advocate for, you know, when I first came out at work, there were some folks who were going to harass me, and I just went to my boss and was like, this is happening. And she called a meeting right then. It was like, this isn't happening. We're not having it here. We're not doing it. If you don't like it, you can leave. And I really do think it needs to be that clear of a line, you know, to make a safe space for people in employment situations.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially in those times, if someone doesn't see someone speak up, it speaks far louder than someone not speaking up.
Yeah, it really, really does. And you don't know who's in the room. Like, you don't know who in the room is LGBTQ who isn't out, and how much it means to see someone speaking up when, you know, someone feels they can't or they have a lot more to lose. So it's really important.
So this leads me into the next question. Say friends or coworkers are spreading a rumor that someone is LGBTQ plus. How should someone respond to those rumors?
Well, I mean, my first reaction is, why does it matter? You know, why does it, you know, why do you care? Like, why, you know, that would be my first reaction. But then I think it's real careful to not, you know, if you need to know the person's situation. Like, I would say stay away from rumors, period. But, you know, if you know someone is out and they don't mind you sharing, and then be like, yeah, that's true, and it's not a big deal. But you don't want to out anyone either. So.
Carmen spoke for both of us. I share the same sentiments. I think that, you know, why should someone care? You know, that always interests me. That's a great question, because it's always interesting to me. You know, why do you care? Why does it matter? Does it change the way you feel about the person? Well, if you find out, are you not going to hang out with that person anymore? You're not going to have coffee with that person anymore? Like, why does it matter? So I feel the same way that Carmen does.
Yeah, and I think all of us here at this conference are, you know, affirming and supportive of queer folks. But how can we out there in the world, with work, with friends, help to get people to become more open-minded?
Well, you know, I think there have been studies that have shown really people talking to people they know. So just being willing to have these conversations. And I know for myself, sometimes you have to cut people off, or if people are just not going to make any progress, or they're just going to be demeaning. But also to think about how to maintain relationships with people and help them learn better to be able to do better. You know, it's a sort of question, and make them think about. I think that what Taran said, the question of, you know, are you not going to have coffee with them? Like, why does this matter to you? And if you can get people to really investigate, like, why it's an issue for them, you know, maybe you can work toward change. But you can't always. I mean, the other side of that is there are some people that are just never going to change their minds. So I think it really depends on the relationship you have with the person and how much progress you can make. But sharing stories, having conferences like this, standing up, sharing your voice wherever you can. I mean, I think that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, I agree with Carmen. I think for a just society as well. I think we should think about, to have the opportunity to have closer relationships with people, to have a tighter relationships with people. I think it helps with a sense of knowing self, who you are. Mm-hmm. As well, because again, I've told you got to call yourself out on your own biases and prejudices. You have to, right? But I think also being able to find opportunities. You never know what opportunity a person can present to you, and if you're going to allow someone's sexuality or sexual orientation to determine whether you're going to have a relationship with them or not, or determine whether this is a great opportunity for you or not, then maybe you don't need the opportunity. Maybe I don't know, but I think people need to be just what Martin Luther King would say: judge a person by the content of their character, right?
Yeah.
So be open. Yeah. Go ahead, Carmen.
No, that's okay. I always jokingly say there are lots of reasons for people not to like me, but my sexuality isn't one of them. It doesn't really. It's just one very small part of me, and so I think the more you can expose folks to, kind of asking their own questions, or and just being real consistent about what you're going to tolerate as an ally. Like, this isn't okay. Like, I'm not going to talk with you about this. If someone isn't going to change, you have to make those decisions about who you want in your life and where you can make change.
I agree.
Because I do think people have to start to feel like the consequences of, you can believe whatever you want. You can think whatever you want, but there's still a consequence in society for that kind of behavior.
That's true.
So I'm going to pull us aside just for a second. So when I teach sexuality in my sociology classes, I always ask my students, I say, who comes out? What groups of people or identities come out? So for our participants here, type in the chat what groups of people come out or come out of the closet. And I want to build off of that for the next question. So what is it when we come out? If Carmen, you want to tackle that question, what is coming out?
So I think of coming out as sharing a part of yourself that people would not otherwise know, an integral part of yourself that it allows you to be more free and to be more who you are, but that you expect that you are going to suffer from discrimination or loss or by sharing that. And so having the courage in whatever arena, and starting with yourself, to acknowledge your truth, your reality, to step toward more truth and freedom for yourself by making people and organizations aware of this thing about you that may impact your relationship with them.
Great. So one thing that I bring up when I teach sexuality is that it's not only LGBTQ folks that come out with their sexuality. Straight folks actually do. There's actually a study that's been done in the UK that looked at middle school boys. And if you can go back to your middle school days and think about oh, that's so gay, or jokes like that, that's actually ways of straight boys affirming what their identity is by saying, I'm not gay, I'm straight, by making those kinds of jokes, because it's very prevalent in middle school. So building off of that idea and knowing that it's so ingrained in our culture, we respond to people who are making jokes like that or homophobic jokes.
Interesting. Don't laugh. I say, tell them that the kind of joke is, that kind of joke is not funny and or acceptable and that you refuse to tolerate it or tolerate those jokes, I think, often ask them to explain, why is it funny? Often people are forced to explain their homophobia and prejudices, but they start to be more apologetic about it and then realize that the joke is not really okay anymore, right? And then I think also, it depends on your setting. I think you report it to someone above you if possible. So your HR, for the sake of college, your professor or whoever the student conduct person is. But or if you're with friends, I mean, tell your parents. I think that just make sure that that there's others that takes jokes seriously, and there's a lot of people who don't tolerate them at all either.
Yeah, I think Taran was spot on. That asked them to explain it. Like, I don't get it. Why is that? What? And then it makes people verbalize the homophobia. That's the root of making that funny.
Yep.
So we've talked a lot today about how people will object to someone being LGBTQ. How would you suggest someone respond to someone that is objecting to someone for religious reasons?
So here's my most recent response, and I grew up in a Southern Baptist family, and have plenty of relatives who object on religious reasons, who see me in my way. I mean, they treat us fine, but they still basically think we're condemned, and my thing that I say to people is, well, there are a ton of religious people, very faithful people who find ways to accept LGBTQ people. Like, it's not, so to me, I feel like it's an excuse in a way. And again, it depends on your relationship with someone. That's a really difficult conversation to have. But you can also say, you can believe what you believe. Everybody can believe what they believe, but how you treat people, is not. I'm not a religious enough person to get into a religious battle, but I really truly believe there are plenty of faithful folks who don't discriminate against LGBTQ people. So there's a way, and I really think it's an excuse just about internal fears, and that makes it easier not to have to deal with that. That's just my opinion.
I often, I'm not a religious man. I go to church, but I'm not a religious man. So for me, I look at it from the standpoint, whoever your higher power is loves all his people, regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of ableism, regardless of socioeconomic status. I think your higher power loves everyone. And so, it's interesting when you get into conversation with people who says, LGBTQA or gay people is not in the Bible. Well, I didn't see where it's not in the Bible either. So, it's I think it's in the eye of the beholder, to be honest with you all. I think it's the eye of the beholder and what people have been taught, what their norms and what their values have been taught to them. And because, again, we all carry norms and values that have been taught to us by our parents. Let's be honest, right? And so I think it depends on the person, but I also think it's not fair. I think it's not fair to religion to assume that a religion is against a person that's of the LGBTQA community. So that's always been an interesting factor to me. Religion and LGBTQA, it's always been an interesting factor to me. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But I think it's in the eye of the beholder, though.
I think I think that's really it. It is in the eye of the beholder, and there are lots of good resources. It's just an absolute fallacy that you can't be a religious person or a Christian person or a faithful person and be LGBTQ plus. The Bluegrass Rainbow Faith Communities publishes a directory that they vet every year of truly affirming LGBTQ faith institutions in Central Kentucky. And, you know, there is within our community folks who grew up in different traditions who want to maintain that. So I think it's really important to know that. And yeah, to say there, you know, you can believe what you want, but it doesn't change how you should treat people.
Right. I agree.
Great. So I have exhausted the questions I had. Does anyone have any other questions before we close out? All right. Well, thank you two for joining us and participating. If anyone has any other questions, you can type them in the chat. I'm sure one of us can get to it later on if you come up with a question, but I'll go ahead and do you have something, Taran?
Yeah, I will ask Carmen, because I'm not in the Lexington area anymore, but Carmen, is there any organizations that anybody can get involved with or even look up to start if they want to be proactive after today?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are many. So that, you know, I work with the PCSO, but there are also, we have 2 Black Pride groups, Bluegrass Black Pride and Kentucky Black Pride, who are doing great work. AVOL, which is essentially does services for folks with HIV and AIDS, but a large part of their clientele is LGBTQ. There's Community Feast, who does meal delivery to folks with HIV and AIDS and other fragile medical circumstances. Yeah, but you can always, there are tons of different organizations. I know I'm forgetting people. But you can always start with us. We kind of consider the PCSO a hub, and one of the things we do is direct folks to other organizations. So, and that's our website is pcsOky.org, or you can find us on Facebook. Another thing, another reminder that folks, really, if you can, contact your senators about the Equality Act. I urge everybody to do that, like, in the next few days. It's really important. And, you know, this is an act that would, right now, in most places in the United States, LGBTQ people can be discriminated against legally. And this is an act that would change that, you know, on the basis of housing, employment, and all of those other things. So that's one thing everybody can do, you know, right now.